Hi, and welcome again to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Chris Gorski.
Today, we are going to learn about some very famous rivers and why they are so famous and so important. Our title is The Lifeblood of European Cities. And since I've already told you it's about rivers, I think that you can kind of connect the two ideas that lifeblood is kind of a symbol for the rivers. And today is January 22nd, by the way. Today is part one of a two-part article. Okay, our title again, The Lifeblood of European Cities. Throughout history, rivers have been far more than waterways. Often called mother rivers, they provide food, trade routes, and a sense of identity. In Europe, 4 rivers stand out for their influence, and each illustrates how a river can mold both daily existence and national consciousness.
The River Thames. The River Thames has always been at the center of London's story. Its strategic location enabled Roman legions to establish a secure foothold on the British Isles. By the Middle Ages, merchants relied on it to transport wool, England's most profitable export at the time. And centuries later, it became the gateway that linked Britain to its empire. Even in times of disasters, the river played a vital role. During the Great Fire of London in 1666, many residents sought refuge on boats or along the riverbanks, while efforts to combat the flames included drawing water from the river.
Today, the Thames functions as both a commercial route and a cultural landmark. Its banks are home to the Tower of London, Parliament, and the London Eye. Writers such as Charles Dickens portrayed its vivid atmosphere, and T.S. Eliot turned its waters into poetry.
The Vltava. The longest river in the Czech Republic, the Vltava, has fashioned Prague in a different way. It united early settlements and allowed the city to prosper through trade, particularly in salt and timber. The Charles Bridge, which stretches across the river, has long been both a thoroughfare and a gathering place, enduring floods and wars while linking generations.
The Vltava is also a cultural emblem. The Czech composer Bedřich Smetana honored it in his symphonic poem Má vlast at a time of national awakening. In doing so, he elevated the river into a lasting symbol of Czech pride and historical memory. Now, Má vlast is such a famous piece. You will notice it immediately when you hear it. And it makes you feel kind of patriotic, even though you're not Czech. It just has a patriotic feel about it. I don't mean to make you uncomfortable with my kind of creaky voice, but it's da-dung, 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 da-dung. When you hear it, it just sounds patriotic.
There is a certain rhythm to certain national styles of anthems that just want you to get up and start marching. It has to be built into the rhythm, isn't there? Where there's almost a 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, a fast pace that wants you to get up and start marching along.
Actually, it's the first part that's more recognizable. I sang somewhere in the middle. It goes da-dung, 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 dung, da-da-da-da-da, da-dun, 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 dun, da-da-da-da-dum. It goes on from there. It just sounds patriotic.
It's that marching beat. It's that marching beat to it.
Let's go back to the beginning. Okay, so the title again, The Lifeblood of European Cities.
So before we begin our articles, I want to just briefly give you an overview of what this is going to be. It's no accident that almost all cities worldwide, especially from the ancient world, they were based near water with very few exceptions, and those very few exceptions almost exclusively come from the modern era. Places like Denver, Colorado, which were a transport hub. Atlanta, which was a railroad hub. Las Vegas was created to get away from law enforcement. All of the old world cities, with very few exceptions, were built near some type of source of water. That's no accident. Today, we have an article that really deep down is an article in which the ways geography shapes culture and presses human ingenuity forward.
Right. And I think back on the cities where I have spent the most time in my life, almost all of them had rivers going through them.
That's right.
Starting from where I come from, the Twin Cities, the Mississippi goes right through.
Look at where origins of civilizations come from, and you will see that Almost without exception, especially in Europe and Africa and Asia, it is at the foot of some river for some reason. That water is so vital, and everything else comes from that. Quite literally, lifeblood.
Okay, our first paragraph. Throughout history, rivers have been far more than waterways.
They are important forms of transportation. There are lots of big, heavy things that are much harder to move across land. It is much easier to put it on a boat and float it downstream.
Right. Often called mother rivers, they provide food, trade routes, and a sense of identity. Food because you can fish from them. Trade routes, that means you can ship on them, using them. And a sense of identity, that is more important than we realize. You know, we also really identify with the Mississippi. You read Mark Twain.
Absolutely, that is correct. And they're often places of national borders. I believe the Rhine has 3 country borders meeting near certain sections of the Rhine.
Ah, yes.
And this is part of your national identity. Over here, we're from Switzerland. Over there is France. This is Germany.
In Europe, 4 rivers stand out for their influence, and each illustrates how a river can mold both daily existence and national consciousness.
So when we mold both daily existence, that means we're shaping the way people live their lives and national consciousness. As we'll see later, that these rivers can factor in towards moving ships to create empires, or during revolutions, people are marching across the bridge. There's reasons why during times of war, bridges become such a focal point, because they allow transportation across these otherwise really impassable type of geographic features. Destroy the bridge or control the bridge.
It also struck me that as I've been reading old Chinese novels, that's how people got around a lot, is taking boats places.
Absolutely. It was by far the most efficient, cheapest, and best way to move things all the way until the invention of the railroad. All of human history, all the way until the point of the railroad, you wanted to move things across the water. And even today, even in the modern airplanes and all types of transportation, it's still the giant container ship that moves most of the world's economy.
Also risky, though, in the novels that I read, they're often swindlers.
Yeah, there certainly are. And pirates and all the much of the other fun things in history.
Because you usually bring a lot of valuables with you. Okay, we're going to start in London.
The River Thames. The River Thames has always been at the center of London's story.
So first of all, the pronunciation,
That's
it
right.
looks like Thames. It is not Thames, it's Thames. There are a few words in English, many of them proper nouns, but not all. When you see TH, you pronounce it as T. One is Thomas. Thomas, Thomas. One is thyme. That's a kind of spice, a kind of herb, not a spice, it's an herb, and it's Thyme, thyme. And then there's Thailand. It's not Thailand, it's Thailand. So watch out. There are a number of words. Some of them are of foreign origin. Many are proper nouns. Watch out. Okay, this one is Thames.
Those are wonderful examples, by the way. Now, why does the River Thames have an H? Well, medieval scholars mistakenly added the H, and it became a habit. So sorry, guys, you got to learn this because they made a boo-boo. So these are probably pre-Celtic origins, and the river quite literally means dark water.
Okay, and I'm going to throw in one more, and it's Esther. That's a woman's name.
Oh, yes.
It's Esther. I have a friend who says, I have a friend named Esther. I said, are you sure she pronounces it like that? I think he just mispronounced it. It's Esther.
All right. Its strategic location enabled Roman legions to establish a secure foothold on the British Isles.
Every time I read something like this, my brain is just doing somersaults trying to imagine the Romans in England. I mean, it just takes a mental exercise to imagine that again.
You know what? You are right. It is a really weird time in Europe, and there's a reason why the Romans had to end up in England. And the reason is that soldiers were guaranteed a portion of land after they finished their military career. But Rome was a colossal place, and men were often forced or conscripted into fighting wars, and so they were guaranteed this land. This meant that by necessity, they were constantly forced into conquest by the nature of their promises to their soldiers. So by the Middle Ages, merchants relied on it to transport wool, England's most profitable export at the time, and centuries later, it became the gateway that linked Britain to its empire.
When I read this, it made me think of how important a lot of textiles are. So think of the role of cotton in the history of England and America. A lot of that, England actually supported slavery because they were all about weaving and making weaving automatic with the automatic looms and things. So you think of the importance of two fibers, wool and cotton.
So Britain is a kind of a mispronunciation of a more ancient word, Britanni, which meant to painted or tattoo folks. So when people were Europeans were first exploring these new islands up north, they found all these tattooed people, and they were real tough guys, and they were known as the tattooed people. And today we don't think of Britain as especially tough guys, but that's what the word literally means. Now, wool is interesting because historically speaking in history, we're not these fluffy animals. That we would carry these guys around for like milk and food. And then just over the course of human migration, that they found that the kind of fluffier sheep over time lasted better in the increasingly colder climates that humans were living in. And through just sheer accident and living with humans. And
accident?
Oh boy. I walked into that. Yes. That the fluffier guys lasted better, and they just increasingly got fluffier and fluffier, and oh yeah, this stuff's pretty warm. Let's make it into clothes. Wool is just a sheer accident of living with humans, and now we have this great material just because we really like their milk and food.
Why did I laugh at Chris's use of the word sheer? When he said sheer accident, it means it was completely due to accident, S-H-E-E-R. But shearing is something you do to sheep. You cut off their wool.
That's right. I walked into the pun.
You walked right into it. And that sheer is spelled S-H-E-A-R.
Okay, let's continue on. Even in times of disasters, the river played a vital role. So it was crucially important. During the Great Fire of London in 1666, many residents sought refuge on boats or along the riverbanks, while efforts to combat the flames included drawing water from the river.
That's another one that paints these amazing pictures in my head and how horrifying it was. They simply could not contain that fire.
Now, the River Thames has played a vital role even in times of disasters, but sometimes the River Thames itself was the disaster. In 1858, Britain went through something called the Great Stink. And I don't tell you this as just being kind of funny, but I really do have a general fascination with the way humans had to take care of our poo-poo problem. It really was important to take care of this properly. And in the past, people just used the river as the toilet. But as London's population exploded in the 1800s due to the Industrial Revolution, that wool we talked about earlier, the river did not flow fast enough to keep the city clean, and London had a problem. The smell was so bad that Parliament often had to end the daily sessions early. They soaked their curtains in chloride of lime, which has a very strong chloride smell, like a pool, but extremely strong. Even that didn't work. Finally, it got so bad, they got the approval and the money to dredge new sewer systems in 18 days. This guy, Joseph Balzaget, was in charge, and in a stroke of genius, he looks at the plans and he says, we're going to tear up the city, and we can only do this once. Double the size of the tunnels. And without this foresight, it's been estimated that London's sewer system would have overflowed in the 1960s. All because this guy in 1858 said, no. We're doing this double. What a foresight. What an absolute stroke of genius. Absolutely 3 cheers for Joseph Balzaget.
There are so many things that we need to thank our ancestors for. This is a big one.
We are so lucky not to have to deal with these problems.
And what we would call that now is raw, untreated waste, which we can no longer directly just dump into rivers. We have to treat it so that it is not a health concern. So we treat it, and maybe we can make some of it into fertilizer, but anyway, we make it so that it will not pollute the river when we get rid of it. Our next paragraph, today the Thames functions as both a commercial route and a cultural landmark. Now, since they've cleaned it up, it is not only useful for transporting things, but it is something that we go to and visit as tourists. And that's the same thing. The same is true of many, many countries. We'll find out about the Czech Republic in a minute. So the Thames, and it has to be clean for it to be a good cultural landmark. And this reminds me of something that happened quite recently. In the Olympics, they wanted to make it possible for people to swim in the Seine. Now, I'm kind of ahead of myself because we're going to talk about that tomorrow. It took a lot of cleaning up of the Seine in order for people to be able to swim in it safely, but they did it.
It costs literally billions of dollars to get it clean.
Okay. Its banks are home to the Tower of London, Parliament, and the London Eye. What's the London Eye?
That's the big Ferris wheel right on the river there.
That's right. It's a huge Ferris wheel. The Tower of London is one of these iconic landmarks. I remember going there when I was on a trip to England for the first time in Parliament. These are all the iconic buildings that you see in pictures of whenever it switches to the UK. That's what you will see. Writers such as Charles Dickens portrayed its vivid atmosphere, and T.S. Eliot turned its waters into poetry.
So the River Thames is also home to the longest river walk in Europe. It comes in at 296 kilometers. It isn't contiguous all the way, which means there are little breaks where you have to get off the path. But for comparison, Taipei and New Taipei City have a total of 210 kilometers of river paths. And I love that. I think that's great. These are likely to flood, and so it's not safe to build. Let's turn it into a green space all across our city. What a fabulous idea. I love it.
The thing about Taiwan is the mountains are generally quite steep. That means that the rivers flow quickly and they are shallow. So we have rivers all over the place in Taipei, but you never see boats in them because they are too shallow.
One final note before we move on. It's the River Thames, although most rivers in the world are the Thames River. That's the kind of other way to say it. But in Britain, you say the river first, then the name. You'll see the rest of the rivers we talk about across these 2 days. It'll be the Vltava River, the Seine River.
Like we have the Mississippi River, the Colorado River. And finally, the Vltava.
The Vltava, the longest river in the Czech Republic, the Vltava has fashioned Prague in a different way. So the Vltava stands for wild water, which gives you a good idea about the speed compared to some other rivers that we'll talk about tomorrow. It united early settlements and allowed the city to prosper through trade, particularly in salt and timber. Now, timber is wood that you use for building. Those are those long strips of wood. They're not used for fire. They're cut carefully and then transported because they're really big and heavy. And it's just easier to put it on water rather than moving it across land.
When they are closer to the tree, we call them timber. But when they are ready to use in building, we call them lumber. Lumber, lumber.
That's a great point. I had never thought of that. There we go. Okay, so a settlement is a place that previously no one has ever lived, but now people want to establish a community there, and not surprisingly, many of those early people are either shepherds, which means they have like goats and sheep, and they're going to eat some of the grass, then move to a new location. You need to move a lot when you are a shepherd. Or you are a fisherman and you are creating a fishing community. Probably the big exception to this is Venice, who were trying to run away from the kind of marauding hordes that were taking over Europe at the time. But generally speaking, new settlements in Europe were roughly fishing and shepherding communities.
And salt is a very, very important commodity all over the world. You will see lots and lots written about it in Chinese historical documents, but salt is the origin of the word salary. So people were often paid in salt because it was so important and expensive and not that easy to get.
That S-A-L is present in a lot of words. It's the Latin word for salt, and you'll see it in words like salad, which gives you an idea that in the past, salad was not fresh leafy vegetables. It was really, really salty.
How about salacious?
Salacious is, perhaps, it's salty.
Salacious means naughty.
Yeah. Okay, let's continue. The Charles Bridge, which stretches across the river, has long been both a thoroughfare and a gathering place, enduring floods and wars while linking generations.
Now, I was not familiar with the name of the river, Vltava, but everybody knows the Charles Bridge. I think it's much more famous than the name of the river.
I want to say maybe part of that is the ease of saying the Charles Bridge, right? Because Vltava is not a really hard word to say, but the VLTA is a little intimidating to the English tongue.
That's right. And it's also a tourist spot, the bridge.
Also, when I was thinking about the rivers here, did you think so we're talking about the River Thames, the Vltava, the Seine, and the Rhine. Was there a river that you thought was like, oh yeah, I anticipate to talk about X?
Those are pretty much the ones I would think of.
I thought the Danube River. And
the Danube, yeah.
I wondered if that was because of the song from like the 60s.
That could
be.
Like
I grew up listening to that song a lot. And I was like, I thought for sure we would talk about that.
Yeah, okay. I guess not. Okay, our last paragraph. The Vltava is also a cultural emblem. So we have found with both rivers, the Thames and the Vltava, that they actually are an icon of their culture and people consider it as part of their identity.
This is such a good point. And I bet you we could play a game and I think we would conclusively arrive at the same answers here. So a cultural emblem, a cultural symbol. So like the most iconic river in America is the Mississippi, I agree. So the most iconic river in Britain is
the Thames.
Like in France, the Seine, right? In China, we would maybe say the Yellow River or the Yangtze River.
Right.
If we said Mesopotamia, if your geography is good, you are going to say the Tigris and the Euphrates.
Right.
And if you don't, your geography is really good because why do you know other river names?
Then you were sleeping through your lessons in grade school.
Yeah, Egypt, the Nile River. These are iconic rivers that shape cultural identity.
Czech composer Bedřich Smetana honored it in his symphonic poem Ma Vlast at a time of national awakening. And that was a big deal because when I tried to kind of sing it out for you, it hit people immediately and it made them feel patriotic. And that brings people together in support of their country. And that sort of reinforces their identity as a people.
That's right. A time of national awakening is maybe a little bit of an unusual phrase that if you're unfamiliar with history, this can be a little strange. And what this means is that in the past, we had this idea of what our country is, or who does this particular land belong to? And I said who because generally these were kingdoms and they were broken up between various empires, etc., etc. But this is the Czech Republic. This name in of itself is telling you we do not belong to a kingdom. We are a country of individuals ruled by the people, not by some king or some emperor. And this people have to start thinking of themselves as independent from this kingdom or this empire. And so this river and this song and this bombastic type of tune shapes the way you think about yourself as an individual and as a collective.
Actually, it's kind of a complicated issue in East Europe because it used to be Czechoslovakia. But now it's Czechia and Slovakia. The languages are completely mutually intelligible, but they decided we have our own individual identity. And that's true of a lot of East Europe, especially like the former Yugoslavia.
I have a now defunct website that I used for my classroom in the United States as a social studies teacher. And I gave it just a catchy name for kids to remember. And I gave it this catchy name, and then in order to make it easier to type, I gave it an abbreviation. So it was Mr. G History. And I abbreviated that to MRG History. And what I didn't know that MRG refers to some local political battles in that area.
Oh, my goodness.
And I would get people showing up mad as bees about I named it MRG History. And here I am making goofy jokes in social studies class.
And you were being really political without knowing it.
I unfortunately used a politically charged phrase. It's not political in American English, but it was very political for these people.
Oh, boy.
And I will say most of them thought it was quite humorous, but I got some very unkind messages from people who were expecting some deep history. And here I am.
Not being neutral.
With just talking about my social studies class, and then Greece would come up, and then Alexander the Great, and all of this area with all this history of fighting. And it was a little weird minefield that I found myself in.
Think of how sensitive politics are in the whole Chinese-speaking part of the world, how sensitive they are in the U.S. now. This is true of humanity pretty much wherever you find people. In doing so, he elevated the river into a lasting symbol of Czech pride and historical memory. Well, we're going to have to stop here. That's all we have for you for today, but we're going to continue tomorrow talking about very, very famous rivers in 2 other countries. Tune in then. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.